You know the story, right? We've all heard it. The lone genius, tinkering away in a garage, who suddenly emerges with a brilliant, world-changing product. They fight against all odds, they work incredibly hard, and in the end, they win big. It's the classic Silicon Valley tale, the one we see in the movies. And it's so appealing, isn't it? It makes success feel almost like destiny. The whole story suggests that if you just have that one perfect idea, if you're that visionary genius, then the universe will just sort of bend to your will. All the boring little details and small choices, they don't matter. If you build it, they will come.
But here's the tough part. That myth, it's a lie. And, it's a dangerous lie. It's probably the single biggest reason new ventures fail. It's responsible for a huge, colossal waste of our most precious resources, people's time, their passion, and all of their skill. So let's really pull back the curtain on this myth. Because to understand the solution, the real way forward, we first have to get our heads around why the old school approach is so fundamentally broken.
And here is the core misunderstanding. The greatest source of waste isn't some inefficient code or a missed deadline. No, the real tragedy is flawlessly executing a plan to build something that nobody actually wants. This is what's called achieving failure. You do everything right, on time, on budget, only to find out your brilliant idea was just plain wrong from the start.
Okay, so if the old way, the detailed plans and heroic visionaries, doesn't work, what's the alternative? Well, the answer is to stop treating business like it's some kind of magic show and start treating it like a science. And at the very heart of this new method is a totally different way to measure progress. So forget about how many features you've shipped or how many milestones you've hit. The only unit of progress that really matters is something called validated learning. This just means rigorously testing your vision and learning through cold hard evidence what actually creates value for your customers. And the engine that powers all this learning is a really simple but incredibly powerful feedback loop. Build, measure, learn. You build a minimal version of your idea, you measure how real customers react to it, and then you learn from that data whether you should stick with your strategy or make a fundamental change. The whole goal is to get through this loop as fast as you possibly can.
This comparison just illustrates the mindset shift perfectly. The old way is like launching a rocket. You create this incredibly detailed, rigid plan. You calibrate everything in advance, and if your initial calculations are even slightly off, you end up with a catastrophic failure thousands of miles off course. The lean way, though, it's like driving a car. You have a destination in mind, sure, but you're using the steering wheel, that's your build, measure, learn loop, to make constant adjustments based on the feedback you're getting from the road right in front of you.
Now, this all sounds great in theory, but let's see what it actually looks like in the messy, chaotic world of a real startup. We're going to dive into the story of IMVU, which is an online avatar company. And this is a perfect example because the author of The Lean Startup, Eric Ries, was actually the co-founder and CTO, so he lived through every single painful mistake and every crucial lesson. Okay, so their strategy seemed absolutely brilliant on paper. They'd build an add-on for existing instant messengers that would be inherently viral. They spent 6 months building what's called a minimum viable product, or an MVP, basically the most bare-bones version possible just to test their idea. They launched it, and crickets, nothing. It was a total failure. Almost nobody even bothered to try it. The real aha moment, the big breakthrough, came when they finally understood why it failed. They sat down with the user and asked them to invite a friend. And this is what the person said. This one single piece of feedback just completely destroyed their entire viral strategy. They had assumed people would want to share it, but the reality was users were actually afraid of looking uncool. So that failed product? It was actually a massive success in validated learning. They learned that customers didn't want an add-on, they wanted a whole new standalone network. And most importantly, they didn't want to use these avatars with their existing friends, they wanted to meet new people. Their entire core strategy was built on a huge leap of faith assumption that was just dead wrong. This right here is the moment of truth. You've just spent months of your life on an idea and the data is screaming at you that it's the wrong one. You don't quit, but you also don't just blindly push forward. So what do you do? This brings us to what is probably the most critical decision any entrepreneur can make. You pivot. Now, a pivot isn't just a random change of mind, it's a structured, deliberate course correction. It's a change in your strategy, not a change in your overall vision. And this is so important. It is absolutely not a failure. A pivot is a recognition that you finally learned enough to make a smarter, more informed bet on how to achieve your vision.
To really see the power of the pivot in action, let's look at another startup. This one was called Votizen, a platform for civic engagement. They went through a series of pivots, and the data they collected tells an incredible story. Just look at these numbers. Their initial MVP had pretty weak metrics across the board, but after their first pivot, check out the referral rate. It exploded from 6% to 54%. And after the second pivot, every single metric improved again. And, crucially, they finally found a revenue model that actually worked. This is what systematic, data-driven progress looks like.
And hey, this isn't just for software startups. The founder of Zappos had a hypothesis. People would be willing to buy shoes online. But instead of building a massive warehouse and buying tons of inventory, he built the simplest MVP you can imagine. He literally went to local shoe stores, took photos of their shoes, and posted them on a simple website. If someone bought a pair, he'd go back to the store, buy them at full price, and ship them out himself.
That incredibly simple, cheap experiment validated his core assumption, and that humble beginning eventually led to Zappos being acquired by Amazon for over $1.2 billion. So what this all really comes down to is this. Entrepreneurship isn't about blindly executing a plan or just, doing it. It's a managed process of discovery. The real goal is to learn, as quickly and cheaply as possible, how to build a real sustainable business. So this leaves us with a question we can apply to any project we start, big or small. Forget the grand vision for just a second and ask yourself this. What is the single riskiest assumption I'm making right now? And what is the absolute fastest, cheapest experiment I can run to test if that assumption is true?